Thanks. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you, everyone. My name is Mike Moreau. I am the co-founder and COO of Habu. Habu is a data clean room software company. We help brands with data collaboration, help provide them with better insights, better measurement, et cetera, all in a privacy-first way. I'm actually joined today by Josh Palau. He is the Chief Media and Activation Officer at PhD. I'll turn it over to Josh to give a little bit more on his background.
Thanks, Mike. So as you said, I'm the Chief Media and Activation Officer over at PhD. I joined the company only 9 weeks ago, where prior to that, I had spent 10 years on the client side, working at Comcast, J&J, and Bayer. So I've made this shift over from dealing with clients in a specific segment to now sort of broadening out into an area where, or a role, I should say, that's got a bit more diversity in terms of the types of industries, clients, and platforms. And so it's been a real sort of interesting shift in terms of now going from a sector like consumer health to everything from retail, travel, finance, and how all those pieces sort of interact with this new space, and especially with folks like you guys in the data clean room space.
Great. Well, thanks, Josh. I'm really excited to talk today and hear your insights with both sides that you just mentioned. The agency experience and then the brand direct experience. And one of the trends everybody is certainly aware of right now is first party data. It seems to be of increasing importance with the death of the third party cookie and all the other trends we're aware of. In your experience, what are some of the pitfalls for those who are not actually adopting a first party data strategy?
So, well, like everybody else prior to me has said, there's not. So I'll get through the easy ones. Of there's not one clear answer. There's everything is changing. I mean, Google has set this date. Who knows if they'll actually get to that date? Not for any reason other than they just might not get there based on testing of what they're doing. So there's a whole lot in this space. I think, regardless of all that, though, I do think we've, at least for the first time, have a sort of date to path towards, and therefore it's incumbent upon agencies and brands to start to figure out, okay, how do we live in this space as it sort of shakes out? Now, all that said, for years, there have been plenty of companies that haven't had a ton of first-party data. And not because they didn't have a great approach to first-party data, but some industries just don't have the reason to want to have a relationship with the consumer, or you don't want to have a relationship with that brand. You want to buy that product, I want to learn about what you're doing, and then I'm off. So I think the biggest guidance that I've had with people over this whole time has been, now is the time to be testing them. So for as much as we're all pulled in thousands of directions and budgets are always tight, now is the time to say, let's bring on another platform, let's do something with another provider to see what alternatives there are around this. I also think it's a great space to sort of double down in areas that are completely unimpacted by this change in cookies, like connected TV. So that's a whole space right there where if you have your first party data, or if you're using unique identifiers, you can apply that to the CTV space now and see how much more performance you can drive from that to maybe to augment, I guess, what you may lose when cookies get deprecated.
Great. And are you seeing it to, fairly even right now, people taking this seriously across categories? Because to your point, there are certain verticals where they're data rich and others where they're data poor. Are you seeing it to be pretty even approach, or are there certain verticals you're seeing really take a leadership position here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give a vanilla answer. I do think, though, it's equal across the board. I think not to minimize the impact of this, but also I'm not one who likes to blow it up. It's going to change things, though. It's going to change fundamentally how we've done business in the past. It's going to impact companies that, I don't know, may or may not have a business model anymore. So I don't think one industry over another is sort of doubling down or pushing in this a little bit further. I will say, I think the ones that are maybe leaning in a little bit more are the ones, to your comment earlier, like they might not have a lot of first party data. So they've been relying on third party data to begin with. So how quickly can they be piloting identifier based platforms or working with companies that have that sort of solution? I think that's where I am seeing more people leaning in. But those who aren't leaning in are like right there, like very close.
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually seen a lot of the same, and it's those that historically have relied more on third-party data and those that weren't data rich that are really investing right now in that first party data asset. And I think we'll see that trend continue. Another trend that we're seeing here is with brand safety. You know, it's certainly not a set it and forget it thing anymore. It's more important than ever, and we've certainly seen that over the last few years. I'd love to hear your thoughts on brand safety.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the entire concept of brand safety is interesting in just, I think, how much it has changed over the last, I'm going to say 4 years, maybe it's longer, but that's the number I'm working with. But I do always enjoy how much of what is happening today has its roots in what happened 20 years ago, or even shorter than that amount of time. But my point being, you know, brands always had a brand safety piece around programs they would be on, or networks they would be on, or, you know, what kinds of shows, whether it was, again, you could be on this show but on a particular network but not other shows on the network. So the bones, or I guess the roots of brand safety, has always existed. Of course, multiply that by a billion when the internet sort of, you know, blows up. And now, how, first of all, it's how do I keep track of this? How do I measure it? So specifically to your comment on, like, it's not a set it and forget it. Yeah, I mean, I think we figured that out long ago, that, you know what, if I don't want to run on Family Guy, that's fine. I could see if it happened, right? But if I'm running on some random website that's over here and I don't even know about it, like, how can I protect my brand? Because that is what's ultimately, you know, a big part of a brand is your sort of persona, or your reputation to people, and sort of how well they trust you. What I think has become very interesting and very tricky for brands to navigate as we've sort of progressed. I don't know if it's progressed or not as a society, but I do think is this idea around being in responsible places, or partnering with who you deem responsible partners. So I'm saying broad statements, not necessarily my own opinions, though some of my own opinion is weaved in here. But, you know, when I was at J&J, I was there when we were on, you know, the Wall Street Journal, and we have to take down YouTube, and I sat there with our team and helped get all that stuff done. I will tell you, interestingly, there's not one off button. Just in case anybody in the audience is wondering, if you need to shut off your campaigns globally, you want to invent an off button, because it does not exist. And so going through all that and understanding how important that was, but the parameter for us was, you know, there were sites that were out there that were, you know, bomb making websites, terrorism websites. Like, these are things that as a society, and everybody in the office can stand by and go, yeah, that's not good content. I don't want to consume that. I don't want my brand to consume that. I don't want to sell that. What's shifting now in terms of what people are calling responsible media, and what I do think is very important, is what are topics that just you as a brand, they're fact-based, but you don't want to be associated with them, right? So maybe there are some facts that talk about the pros and cons of masks, or vaccines, or political views. Like, those are opinions. Some of those are based in facts, but I don't want to be part of those, right? And then there are also a whole bunch of sites, or I guess content players out there that are spreading misinformation. And so, you know, you know, trust me, my job did not get any easier moving to the agency side. But I think about my brand friends and, like, trying to navigate between, okay, these are just subjects we don't want to be a part of. Then there are these companies that actually proliferate misinformation, or that allow people to share misinformation. And I don't know if I want to be associated with them either. I don't know if I want to keep investing in a platform that isn't managing itself to make sure they're not spreading responsible media and spreading stories that aren't based in fact. So I think it's a real tricky time right now. And so you've got to be real vigilant about what your brand stands for and what you want to be associated with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what, you know, you made a great point about picking the right partners, and, you know, understanding who those people are and what they stand for. But with ads running in so many places, technology has to play a role too. I mean, how do you think about that balance between using technology to, you know, protect yourself versus only working with a handful of partners you can really trust? Because the latter is really limiting, but safer. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
No, it's a great comment, because I don't know if there is a right answer. I think well, let me take that back. The right answer is what's best for your brand and your consumers and their reputation. So I've worked, I mean, now I'm thinking about it, I've worked at a lot of conservative companies. So I've worked at a lot of conservative companies that would say, you know what, that seems, you know, interesting, funny, but it's the kind of content we don't want to be associated with. And we're not talking again about anything that anybody wouldn't necessarily see on a regular program. And so I think that so let me just talk about, I guess, both sides. I do think this idea of we're going to work with partners that have a curated supply chain and that have a sort of validation around viewability, around fraud, around brand safety. And it's going to be a small group. We're going to go for that. I think there's merit to that. It limits reach, right? And you hope you're betting on the fact that the consumer you're trying to reach lives in this space. And depending on the size of your audience or what you're trying to go after, your industry, that might work perfectly fine. I do think, though, Mike, to your point, I mean, it is limited, right? And there's just some degree of how much can change, or how much, I guess, variety do you have with those types of offerings? So then if you swing to the other side of it, yes, I think a good view of starting at least with a sort of exception list or a disallowed list of here's the sites, the keywords, the things we do and don't want to be associated with. I think you do that and it takes a nice chunk out of the mix. And then I think, yes, the technology players, whether it's the open slates, IAS, white ops, like there's a ton of them out there. I'm saying a comment, not a criticism. There's a ton, and they all do great work. It's just finding the one that I think can get you the information and make you feel as safe in that timely fashion. I think also the key there is their responsiveness, because every brand I think wants to make sure they manage this quickly, and there are some brands that just have a higher sensitivity to it, right? And so like I think that's where you as a brand need to figure out who has the most sort of responsiveness that can live with us. And then the last part, which I don't think there's a tool or technology that can do anything about this, is I think you have to make some hard decisions on the Facebooks and Instagrams and the Twitters of the world to say, I do or don't want to be associated with the platform. And there's no technology on that one. That's just a very awkward meeting in a conference room with you and lots of people in your company.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great advice. It's very realistic. I mean, there's no silver bullet answer. It's something every brand has to think about and decide on their level of sensitivity and tolerance, and then make the best decisions they can. And I do think the technology has come a very long way in help protecting brands, but none of them are perfect.
No, yeah. And if I could just like to go a little further, I mean, the other thing too is, and just knowing the audience on this, I guess this meeting, I'm used to seeing people and having them laugh at my jokes just because I'm on stage, not because they're funny. And so
I'll laugh louder. I'll make up.
I appreciate that. I agree. Thank you. And so I do think though, there's this, for years, I always have this conversation about like, as a marketer or as a media person, oh, you mean, and this is going back quite some time. So I remember meeting with a client and we were saying, yeah, the ability to like ping your mobile phone while you're actually in a Target with a coupon for something in that store, like as a marketer and as an agency or a brand person, oh my gosh, sign me up all day long. Now, Josh, the parent, I have older kids now, but walking through a Target with one kid running one way and one kid running the other way, please don't serve me that ad. Like I just need my shopping list. And so I think we're at a much more serious inflection point as it comes to this, because now you have to decide, I love what these platforms offer in terms of targeting and helping me build my business, but I don't like what they're doing. I don't like how they're sharing this information, or they're not managing it better. I don't like the messaging they put out there. I don't like how they're handling privacy for consumers. And so you get this point of sort of like, who are you, right? Are you the person, are you making decisions based on the person you are outside of work? Or are you the person that's making decisions based on who you are inside of work? And frankly, like those lines have completely blurred even before COVID happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Another trend that we're seeing is certainly the consumer journey is just getting blown up, based on all the things we've already talked about. And it's just, you're seeing whole industries and technologies sort of made obsolete. They're just not functioning the way they used to. How do you think about measurement and, are there new KPIs? How do you really think about in a post-cookie world, like what does measuring that consumer journey look like?
Yeah. So this is another, like between obviously, hey, just so everybody's in the audience knows, Mike and I talked ahead of time. So I have some ideas to what he's going to say. So he's hitting on two things but I did say, like, of the multitude of topics he shared with me, these were the two that I was most passionate about and frankly felt the audience could get the most benefit from. And so I will say this is another one though, in terms of passion areas, because I do think, I believe wholeheartedly that once the mobile phone got great adoption, the purchase funnel just completely changed, or the purchase funnel just completely changed. I mean, I could say the funnel's dead. I could say something kitschy that would get me, a quote somewhere. But that's not what I'm looking for. But I think the idea of I wasn't even aware of this product or condition, but I'm on Instagram, and because I look like someone who may want that product, I jumped immediately to purchase, right? So I think you take that now then add to the fact, like all the other targeting that we've been able to do, pre and post cookies, some of that stuff will still be available, but I feel like there's been so much that's happened with the consumer journey that it's not a linear journey anymore, right? And somebody I worked with said that the other day, that like, it's not that the funnel went away, it's that it's not linear anymore, and the journey is much more defined by the consumer than it is by the messages sometimes that we put out there. And so I think that's having an impact on how marketers have worked for years and trying to figure out, and we've all gotten quite good at this, like how to actually reach that person. So to answer your question, in the end, we're still going to focus on sales, subscriptions, signups, streams. Like there are still good, strong, fundamental KPIs out there, depending on your business, that help you define sort of, okay, which ones drove those. So I used to, in a prior couple of lives, I made a comment one time about people were talking about, brand equity and awareness and favorability, and all those things were great. And what I would say is, but as long as they ended up in some sort of conversion, right? Be it a purchase or something. And I always said, like, hey, if we get brand equity scores off the charts, but we don't grow revenue or share, do I still have a job? And the answer was no. And so I think ultimately we have to remember that and keep that in mind. I see people talking about an awareness budget and a branding budget and a conversion. The consumer journey, again, it's all over the place. You could literally make me aware of this product and I could buy it in 10 seconds. Right? And so there are probably categories, automotive, cable, telecom, where, yeah, you know what, let me talk with my spouse, let me do some comparison shopping, but it's just so fast. And so I think that, using the hard KPI metrics of what drives your business and then mapping back to what platforms or what ad creative or what targeting strategies drove that behavior, that's, I think, where you want to still focus your efforts on.
Yeah, I think it's just becoming a lot more difficult to do that. So the tracking piece is really, really hard. I actually feel like reaching the right audience is easier than it is to measure what happened with that audience. Are you seeing any like new strategies or tactics in that regard? New things people are trying out to actually try to put that whole picture together?
Well, I mean, I think I have an okay answer. I'm not going to say I have a great answer because there's also some purview of people I've seen and what I can share. I think people are trying to do a better job, whether it's using an attribution model or whether they're trying to use a clean room to figure out like what's happening and what kind of use cases drive that behavior. I think the people where I'm seeing, I think people trying to get ahead of it are the ones that are trying to do things with use cases of what I'm trying to see work. So do people on my email list, do they have a higher or lower propensity to do X? Have they signed up for Y? I think back in my Comcast days, we used to look at a lot of data just around consumption and churn. And so I think I've seen a few people who are pushing more in that space or continuing to go further, whether it's using a CDP or again, some sort of other data provider to help them with that, because I think they're trying to get that clearer picture. The other beauty of this world we live in, and again, with cookies going away, who knows how that changes, is this world of lookalikes and how much you can scale those. So I think that's where companies are trying to sort of see how they can build their pools in this next, whatever, call it like 7 months. So going back to the first question you asked me, like getting back to getting some semblance of a first party data approach in a way that's just, that's in a way that'll accelerate what they've been doing, provided again they have a reason to share, a reason to strike up that relationship.
Cool, thank you. Super informative. And building on all of these themes, obviously the walled gardens versus the open web. There are a lot of trade-offs as far as data that's available, the ways that people get it. Are you seeing, and obviously without getting into any specifics or anything, just generally out there in the world, are you seeing more brands go all in on the walled gardens, or are you seeing them go more towards the open web, direct partnerships? I'd love to just better understand what you're seeing out there in that regards, because it all fits together,
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I'll give an answer that covers most of it. It's all over the place which, by the way, it was always kind of all over the place. Now we all know that, though, when I say all over the place, a majority of the money is flowing to Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Like there's no confusion there. So what I do think is starting to happen though is, well, first there is that conversation we're having about just like a mindfulness of brand responsibility. So I mean, nothing I'm seeing in anybody's earnings is telling me that people are pulling back from some of these platforms. I do think there is some degree of where do we want to be associated. So that's happening to a certain extent. I don't see any of the conversations that you're seeing from sort of the regulatory space influence where investments are happening. I think where you might see some people, maybe investing more heavily in the walled gardens are those that realize, look, they've got data that like we just don't have, we can't scale against. I mean, again, Google's going to have a great solution for you to target Google people, which there happen to be billions of them. So, cookies or not, spending more with Google and working with their tech stack is probably going to be an advantage for you. I think on the other hand, or the other side of that coin is partners like the Trade Desk have been incredibly smart and thoughtful and first to move on CTV, which, as we all know, is not only taken off, but if you think about the amount of media that's consumed, there's all those stats say how much media is consumed and how it's taken off. Keep in mind that Netflix, Apple, Disney, and I think I'm missing one. They don't even give me as an advertiser an opportunity to serve an ad. So while there's an increase in consumption, some of the supply is going away because we don't even have a chance to reach you on those platforms. So I think that's making people say, where can I reach folks and actually build something that I could use for longer term growth, and where can I use for longer term audience development. But I think there's also just some degree of testing and direct partnerships that's happening because I have to learn how these things work. And I think that's the great thing I'm seeing is I feel like companies that were so efficiency driven are starting to say, I know it doesn't fit our model, but in 8 months, that model is going to get blown up. So if we don't see, how connected TV works or how direct partnerships works or programmatic guarantees or PMPs work, but we won't have a business come 2022.
Totally agree. Actually, we have a question that came in, so I will flip over to that.
Also, for the record, I don't know the question. This is the unscripted part of the program, so I want to demystify this whole thing.
I didn't know it either. I'm reading it straight from the chat box here.
Oh, great.
Could you speak a bit to what specific elements are standard to collect in first-party data sets across categories, and industry-specific examples as well? What data elements are most valued to predict future or repeat sales?
Okay, so here's my overarching statement. I'm going to try to answer this question. Whoever asks this question, if I don't answer it, find me on LinkedIn and I'll try to find you a better answer. It's interesting for me because I spent 6 years at Razorfish where we had a ton of clients all over the place, but a lot of direct response clients. And then Comcast had a ton of that. And then I go to consumer health for 5 years. And there's data there. It's just not as easy to tease out. So I am a believer of any sort of first party data that you can grab that is an indicator of purchase behavior or competitive behaviors. Like that's your most important, because it's easier to convince someone who has done something with a product or done something in a category where you sell a product than it is to convince me that I have allergies and I need a product. And so I think anything you can do, at least with those kinds of information pieces that you can gather those in, I think there's a ton of information out there that are behavioral signals, which I think are valuable, but I don't know if they're as important. So I'm a music lover, I'm a runner, I like books. Yeah, all those things are great, but if I don't make a running shoe or sell books, I'm not necessarily as valuable unless you know that about your consumer. And so I think it's those kinds of indicators, and then anything you can do post. The big thing is, you get this first party data, but what do you do in terms of building out after that? So what is lifetime value? What is their reorder? And again, I'm being very specific, like how many streams do they watch? How much content do they consume? And like that to me is where you start to learn who your valuable audiences are and which ones are just there for one time. And then you're not going to have anything else beyond that.
Thank you very much, Josh. We've got a bunch rolling in now. I had my own question I wanted to get to, but I think we're going to run out of time. So I'm going to try to rip through some of these pretty quickly. How do you approach emerging media channels, and how do they factor into your overall strategy?
I think let's try to do this rapid fire. I think you have to be open to what's out there. I think they have to have some sort of value prop to actually helping me connect with the consumer for what I need. So dedicate a percentage of your budget to it, test a couple, but it always has to be around for me, it's about what problem do you solve for my consumer.
Terrific. And yeah, you can take all the time you want. I said wrap. We'll go quickly, but it's just they're coming in.
I like
fast.
this.
But we got time. We still have some time here. Many brands have drastically reduced media budgets over the past year. How has your media plan adjusted? If your budget has been reduced, have you gotten more creative and efficient with your strategies?
So I think, well, okay, so this is somewhat, to me at least, I feel like this is a little bit more industry dependent, right? So a year ago, if you were in travel or hospitality, like your budgets got slashed for obvious reasons. And I think you're seeing all of those come back. So I would say, I think again, I think I'm answering this question. You know, if they're slashed, to me it always goes. It's and I've had to deal with this a few times in my career where if you can get to a measurement model that shows you where you perform the best, you have to focus there. So I have spent many times, or not, let me say it a different way. There's multiple partners that you would think that I had worked with in the past just because of their scale, but based on budgets and either lack of ability to actually measure or cost, I didn't work with those partners. And again, I'm talking about some household names. So I think you have to be very judicious about where the performance lies. And then once you start to show that performance, hopefully budgets grow, and then you can do a little more testing. But I think if you're really down to like I only have X and it's already been cut, then I think you really have to focus on those places that drive the greatest performance.
Great, thank you. Then next up, have you shifted your data strategy in the past few months? And obviously, I know you shifted roles,
Well,
shifted worlds, all of that. So not sure how exactly you want to answer this question, but
yeah, I mean, look, I'm never short of words to say. So I'll say this: I talk with lots of friends of mine who are on the brand side or client side, and that yes, I wouldn't say it's been a fundamental shift because this is probably the longest conversation ever in terms of how long we've known this is coming up. So I think a lot of people shifted their audience strategies to not rely on third parties as much, to try to work with partners to help build first party measurement. I'm sorry, not first party measurement, first party data sets. I think that started to happen. So I think that's one of the things. I mean, I will say, just coming into the Omnicom world, the audience platform they had built years ago, and I only say years, like it wasn't like a billion years ago, was based on audience, and it was based on identity, and it was based on using big data providers that are well known, that have established relationships and are all privacy compliant, in a way that you can have a unique identifier. And so I am seeing obviously that more people focusing on that identity world now, because that's where a lot of this conversation is moving to.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well. Very hot topic. And then we've got one more here. What innovations and technologies are you utilizing to execute your strategies? Has that changed since the pandemic began?
So, okay, so here's what I would say. I would say in the very beginnings, I guess mid-pandemic. I mean, now we're still technically in it, but I think what shifted was, for a lot of people, I'm speaking a bit broadly here, was looking at places where we knew consumers were going, right? So Instacart went from like here to here, in terms of adoption, and so I think it was finding partners that were filling a need for consumers. And my big thing for all brands is be where your consumers need you. And granted, we were in a pandemic and everybody needed to help everybody. My point more was like, I don't care if there's a measurement model for those kinds of partners. If consumers are there and they're looking for your products, and your products especially can help them during this time, and it could be a sourdough starter kit that helped people during this time, go ahead and be there. So I think it's more of a broadening of some of these platforms and going with them based on audience data. I think other commerce partners that I've seen sort of not some adoption, like commerce partners that like a Micmac, like I've talked to them a bunch, and I think that the offering they have to help commerce partners provide, answer a need that a lot of others can't. I think that's another one. But I think anything that can help, where I'm seeing the most push is places that can help me fill gaps that I traditionally couldn't fill, and they're going to be bigger gaps once the world of cookies really does go away.
Great, thank you so much. And then the final thing I'd love to ask Josh, I mean, you covered a lot of ground in this chat. If you think through, any advice you might have for brands and people, how they're thinking about navigating the next 6 months, year, 2 years, as we, go into new territory, any thoughts or advice that you have in parting?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. I mean, on the one thing is to me, it's a no-brainer. Is, hey, come work with me. Like I think that's always a good one. But seriously though, I do think there's a little bit of thoughtfulness to be put into these next few months. And trust me, like I've lived in a lot of worlds these days, And so I understand that it's just very easy for someone to say, you should test more, you should do more. Listen, there's limited resources, budget, time, just keep that list growing. I just think we're at a point now where everything has accelerated. I mean, again, we've all seen the stats of e-com and connected TV growing faster than they should have. And all those things it's at this point where like there's so much at your disposal right now that if you're a brand and you're not trying to proactively get into these spaces, you're not proactively trying to put more into connected TV or look at more commerce solutions or figure out your identity strategy, like you're going to get left behind. This is not, I'm never one of those big, like, let me say something to be provocative people, but this is that moment because so much more has been adopted. This isn't like, oh, mobile's growing or commerce is growing. Like, no, those things took off and we still had tons of volume with Google, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, all of them. So my biggest piece of advice, which probably but maybe you need to hear it more directly, is you need to make sure you have an approach on those things and you're testing these things because you need to figure out what works and what doesn't. And you may experience some loss in the short term, but your cookie strategy is going away. So better to learn now how to use a partner like the Trade Desk and then make it work, even if it means taking a step back to figure out what life is like in 2022. I can tell you right now, won't be flying cars though in 2022. That's been a lie. Biggest lie.
And I'm glad you made that message so clear.
The flying car one?
Because, I'm sorry, was that?
The flying car joke?
No. Everything just prior to the joke. The joke was great, but no, what at least what I've seen is, some brands are taking that exact approach and have that mentality, and others are not. Others are just sort of seeing how it all pans out, and I don't think that's going to end well for them. Well, thank you so much, Josh. This is great. We did have a couple more questions come in, but they're ones that could be handled offline. So thank you.
If anybody has questions, again, I'm easy to find. But thank you, Mike. This was great. I appreciate you, standing in and helping with this.
Of course. Thank you, Josh.
Okay, and thanks both of you guys. If you've ever wondered what a Spotify podcast would sound like if you put the speed up to 1.5, that was Josh. So thanks for that. And one of the things that's really interesting that's sort of coming out from these talks is this notion that the world is moving so quickly